On December the 1st, 1939, which was Friday, Prime Minister Risto Ryti, who then had to take a leave of absence from serving as governor of the Bank of Finland and actually resign, replaced a fellow progressive or liberal as the Prime Minister of Finland. Professor Aimo Kajander had to resign. And this government included Social Democrat Väinö Tanner as its foreign minister, and then Councillor of State Juho Kusti Paasikivi as its minister without portfolio, whose main task was to lead an eventual Finnish peace delegation. On the same day, the so-called Democratic Republic of Finland was proclaimed, supposedly in Terijoki, but since that city or town was only occupied by the Soviet forces on that day, its proclamation must have been issued elsewhere, either in Moscow or somewhere else, and probably it was penned by the Finnish-born communist Mr. Otto Ville Kuusinen, who became that so-called government's prime minister. It was to serve as the precursor to the Soviet takeover of Finland, although a puppet or nominal Communist Republic of Finland might have been created with Mr. Kuusinen as its president. And the Soviet government made an assistance treaty and friendship treaty with this puppet government. A recruitment office for volunteers to fight for the Finns opened in Stockholm, Sweden. The Swedish government had decided, except for one prominent minister, the Swedish foreign minister, Mr. Rickard Sandler, who was a warm friend of Finland, not to send any official units of its army to Finland, but to allow voluntary soldiers from Sweden to fight in Finland, and also to allow material aid and humanitarian aid to be shipped or transported to Finland. Probably one of the chief reasons was that Sweden, which had, by God's grace, been officially in peace since 1814, didn't want to be drawn into this superpower conflict. Probably its king and most of its ministers, including Prime Minister Per Albin Hansson, feared that should Finland assist Finland militarily, in the sense of sending its army or units of the army into Finland, Germany and the Soviet Union could together invade Sweden. And Sweden then continued this balancing, somewhat precarious neutrality throughout the rest of the Second World War. It is a known fact that from its northern mines, especially from the iron ore mines of Kiruna in northern Sweden, much material was shipped to Germany to be used in Germany's armaments industries. On December the 2nd, 1939, the Roosevelt administration imposed a moral embargo on the Soviet Union and urged US companies not to sell the Soviets airplanes or components in their manufacture. The Red Army took Petsamo, or Petchenga, on the Arctic Ocean shore. On Sunday, December the 3rd, 1939, Finland appealed to the League of Nations for intervention. 24 Vickers Wellington bombers raided German warships at Heligoland. A German anti-aircraft battery was hit, probably the first British bomb of the war to land on German soil. Then, on Monday, December the 4th, 1939, the German submarine U-36 was sunk in the Heligoland Bight by the British submarine Salmon. On Tuesday, December the 5th, 1939, the Soviet 7th Army reached the main defensive line of the Finns, roughly in the center of the Karelian Isthmus, the so-called Mannerheim Line, named after General and Marshal Gustav Mannerheim, who had been appointed by President Kyösti Kallio as the Finnish Army's commander-in-chief already on December the 1st, either on November the 30th or December the 1st, 1939, and he would remain the Finnish army's commander-in-chief throughout the remainder of Mr. Kallio's presidency, throughout Ryti roughly 3.5-year presidency, and of course throughout his own presidency. Off the coast of Uruguay, on the eastern coast of South America, the captain of the German passenger steamer Usukuma decided to scuttle the ship when it was intercepted by the British cruiser Ajax. The Ajax rescued the 107-member crew of the Usukuma and interned them as enemy civilians. On Wednesday, December the 6th, 1939, the Battle of Taipale began in the Finnish Karelia, on the Karelian Isthmus, yes. On Thursday, December the 7th, 1939, the battles of Kollaa in the Karelian, in Ladoga, Karelia, and then Suomussalmi in the eastern to northeastern Finnish province of Kainuu began. SS Untersturmführer Herbert Lange began overseeing the euthanization of mentally disabled patients at the Dziekanka Psychiatric Hospital in Gniezno. Between this day and January the 12th, 1940, over 1,000 patients were loaded into a van and gassed with carbon monoxide. It was ironical that Germany was a world leader in the prevention of cruelty to animals. Hitler himself was an anti-vivisectionist, and at least during most of the Second World War he followed a vegetarian diet, at least for the most part. But ironically, it can be said that if you were a dog or a cat in the German Empire, I'm somewhat exaggerating of course, you often were safer than if you were a human being, if you were classified as one of the so-called subhumans, Jews, Slavs, Romani, so forth, or if you were considered an anti-social, counter-revolutionary, anti-Nazi, anti-Hitler, of course, or if you were born again Christian who followed the word of God rather than Hitler's tirades and Mein Kampf, or then or if you were a pacifist, for example. On Friday, December the 8th, 1939, the Roosevelt administration sent Britain a diplomatic note protesting the British policy of seizing German goods on neutral ships. On Saturday, December the 9th, 1939, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the German auxiliary cruiser Orion was commissioned. On Sunday, December the 10th, 1939, the Nobel Prizes were awarded in Stockholm, Sweden's capital. The recipients were Ernest Lawrence of the United States for physics, Adolf Butenandt of Germany, and Leopold Ruzicka of Switzerland for chemistry, Gerhard Domack of Germany for physiology or medicine, and Mr. Franz Emil Sillanpää of Finland for literature. The Peace Prize was not awarded, probably given the Second World War's outbreak. Nazi Germany forced Butenandt and Domack to refuse their awards at the time, but after the war had ended in 1945, they accepted those awards. Lawrence did not travel to Europe because of the war and accepted his prize on February the 29th, 1940 at University of California in Berkeley. The first convoy of Canadian troops departed Halifax, Nova Scotia for Britain. On Monday, December the 11th, 1939, the League of Nations, where Finland's former foreign minister, Mr. and Dr. Rudolf Holsti, was the representative for Finland, or ambassador for Finland, sent the Soviet Union a telegram calling for a cessation of hostilities with Finland and to submit the dispute with Finland to mediation by the League. On Tuesday, December the 12th, 1939, the British destroyer HMS Duchess sank in a collision with the battleship Barham off the Mull of Kintyre. The Battle of Tolvajärvi was fought in the Finnish Karelia resulting in Finnish victory. On Wednesday, December the 13th, 1939, occurred the Battle of the River Plate. In South American waters, the German cruiser Admiral Graf Spee was critically damaged in a battle with the British warships Exeter, Ajax, and Achilles. So it was probably in the Uruguayan territorial waters. Yes, so close to the coast of Uruguay in South America. Actually, that Gulf of Rio de la Plata separates Uruguay from its southern neighbor Argentina. On Thursday, December the 14th, 1939, the Soviet Union was expelled from the League of Nations after it was declared the aggressor in the war with Finland. Of the main powers on the world stage, Britain and France were now the only ones left in the League, since Germany, Italy, and Japan had already quit, and the United States never joined it. Mr. Vidkun Quisling, an army officer and one-time defense minister, whose own Nazi party, National Samling or National Coalition or National Unity, depending on how we translate it, had miserably failed in the 1933 and 1936 Norwegian parliamentary elections. He met Hitler and high-ranking members of the German military in Berlin as the Nazis investigated ways to go about occupying Norway. On Friday, December the 15th, 1939, the government of Uruguay gave the Admiral Graf Spee 72 hours to leave. On Saturday, December the 16th, 1939, the first Battle of Summa in the Karelian Isthmus on the southern front line between Finland and the Soviet Union began. On Sunday, December the 17th, 1939, the German cruiser Admiral Graf Spee was scuttled in neutral waters near Montevideo, the Uruguayan capital, as the time limit to leave port was running out. The first Canadian troops arrived to Britain. On Monday, December the 18th, 1939, the Battle of the Heligoland Bight was fought in the skies over the Heligoland Bight in northern Germany. The Battle of Kunlun Pass began in the Second Chinese-Japanese War. Adolf Hitler sent Joseph Stalin a telegram on what was supposed to be his 60th birthday, wishing him good health and a happy future for the peoples of the friendly Soviet Union. And then in his reply telegram, Stalin thanked Hitler, and this information is my vague memory from the British-produced Chronicle of the Second World War, then telling that, adding that the friendship between Germany and the Soviet Union had been cemented in blood. In fact, Joseph Stalin, according to his English language Wikipedia article, was born 1 year earlier, on December the 18th, 1878. Okay, then on Tuesday, December the 19th, 1939, the British-French Supreme War Council met for the fourth time and decided to send help to Finland if requested, against the wishes of those two neutral Scandinavian countries that bordered and still border on Finland, Norway and Sweden, because they didn't want to be drawn into any kind of superpower conflict and become scenes of fighting. Sweden was able to avoid actual fighting. Norway was not. On Wednesday, December the 20th, 1939, a fundraising rally for the Finnish relief fund called Let's Help Finland was held at Madison Square Garden in New York. The previous US President and Republican Herbert Hoover, who was a great humanitarian and a warm friend of Finland, made a speech at the event, which was also broadcast to the American people. Then on Thursday, December the 21st, 1939, in the face of strong Finnish resistance, the Soviet Union halted large-scale operations in order to bring in more resources before attempting a new offensive. On Friday, December the 22nd, 1939, the First Battle of Summa on the Karelian Isthmus ended in Finnish victory. 2 express trains collided in Magdeburg, Germany, killing at least 132 people. On Sunday, December the 24th, 1939, Pope Pius XII gave a Christmas address to 25 cardinals in which he offered a 5-point program as a basis for negotiating a just and honorable peace. On Monday, December the 25th, 1939, the Battle of Kelja between the Finns and Soviets began in the Winter War. On December the 26th, 1939, or Tuesday, the 1st Royal Australian Air Force Squadron, number 10 Squadron RAAF, arrived in Britain. On Wednesday, December the 27th, 1939, the battles of Kelja and Taipale ended in Finnish victories. On Thursday, December the 28th, 1939, the German submarine U-30 spotted the British battleship HMS Barnham west of the Butt of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, so off the coasts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and hit it with a torpedo. 4 crew members were killed, but the Barham was able to make it back to Liverpool. The British Minister of Food, W.S. Morrison, announced that starting on January the 8th, rationing would be expanded to include butter, bacon, ham and sugar. On Friday, December the 29th, 1939, the consolidated B-24 Liberator had its first flight. On Saturday, December the 30th, 1939, a passenger train and a troop train collided in Naples, Italy, killing about 40. An article written by Hermann Göring appeared in the Völkischer Beobachter, one of the main Nazi newspapers, if not the main one. I wonder what it means in English. Völkisch or folk or national or nationalist observer, warning that as soon as Hitler ordered the Luftwaffe or the German Air Force to attack Britain, it will make an assault such as world history has never experienced. I wonder if President Trump had this in mind when in or around August 2017 he claimed that if North Korea threatened the United States, that threat would be met with fire and fury such as the world has never experienced. On Sunday, December the 31st, 1939, New Year's Eve observances in Britain, France and Germany were very subdued due to blackout and noise restrictions. Most celebrations were held in private homes with the windows shuttered. German propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels made a radio address reviewing the official Nazi version of the events of 1939, so Nazi fake news. No predictions were made for 1940 other than saying that the next year will be a hard year and we must be ready for it. Well, at least he showed some realism. Generalissimo Francisco Franco, the right-wing dictator of Spain, made a radio broadcast asking all Spaniards in this period of depression which follows any war to close the mouths of grumblers and not permit the enemies of the state to take advantage of the situation. In other words, he was asking people, the Spanish people, to practice self-censorship. Japan and the Soviet Union signed an accord on fishing rights in adjacent territorial waters. They were not yet at war.